The attack of September 11, 2001 is one of those times in American history where everyone remembers where they were, what they were doing. It's one of those things that marks a generation or several generations. The difference between September 10th, 2001 and September 12th, 2001 is a difference of not just a terrible, horrific attack, probably the worst in our history, but also a difference in awareness. We have to be just as determined and just as united in our effort to do everything that we can to end terrorism, which involves being militarily prepared. It involves being prepared from the point of view of intelligence. It means having internal defenses against possible terrorist attack. The cell is a very valuable thing for people to come and see and to use as a way of growing in their understanding of terrorism, what's involved, and how they can contribute to our understanding of terrorism and our ability ultimately, for the right reasons, to prevail over it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Melanie Perlman, Executive Director of The Cell.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to this evening's event that the Counterterrorism Education Learning Lab, The Cell, is co-hosting with RTD in conjunction with the 13th Transit Safety and Security Roundtable, sponsored by FTA and TSA. I know many of you are here from across the country. Welcome. I also want to thank our local sponsors, the Colorado Information Analysis Center and CEP. And I also want to recognize the Denver Art Museum for letting us host this event at their fabulous facility. As we all know, public surface transportation, America's train and bus systems are a ripe target for an attack in this new era of terrorism. Just recently, the United States discovered documents from Osama bin Laden's compound that revealed al-Qaeda was developing an elaborate plan to attack mass transit systems here in the United States. There have been more than 1,000 terrorist attacks on buses since 1970, and nearly 150 attacks on passenger rail systems between 1995 and 2010. And we all remember the recent attacks in Mumbai, Madrid, London, and Moscow. Roughly 7 million Americans use public transportation systems to commute to work every day. What is even more remarkable, given these statistics, is the limited amount of TSA funding that is directed towards surface transportation security. The question we must continue to address is how do we manage the risk in these austere times? Tonight's forum will address this critical security issue. The Counterterrorism Education Learning Lab, the CEL, is dedicated to addressing today's terrorist threats and empowering individuals and government with the knowledge to help combat it. And tonight's program is part of that effort. In addition to the exhibit, in which I hope all of you saw this evening, and our ongoing speaker series, the CEL, in partnership with our state's Fusion Center, developed a public safety initiative called the Community Awareness Program. This innovative program is designed to educate citizens on how to assist in preventing terrorism and criminal activity in their communities. It is clear that citizens play an important role in mass transit security, and the CAP is created to engage them to be part of this effort. There is more information about the CAP in your takeaway folders. And now I would like to recognize and introduce a tremendous partner of ours that we have had the privilege to work with in helping to keep our community safe. RTD and its Transit Police Chief, John Tarbert. John?
Doing a lot of new things in the last couple of days. It's exciting. I'm here to introduce the guest speaker tonight. And, you know, just like anything else in law enforcement, here's what you got to say. Okay, we'll get through it. It's a good thing. I'm proud to introduce Craig Coy. Craig is the principal of the MarkQuest LLC, a strategic and business development firm serving public and private companies in the defense, aerospace, and homeland security markets. Previously, he was the president and chief operating officer of the newly established L3 Homeland Security Group in July 2006. Mr. Coy served as the chief executive officer of the Massachusetts Port Authority beginning in April of 2002 during the aftermath of 9/11. He instituted sweeping management and operational changes to Logan International Airport, the Port of Boston, the Tobin Bridge, Bedford Regional Airport. At Massport, Mr. Coy led the implementation of Logan's nationally recognized 100% bag screening program, the nation's first permanent system approved for a major U.S. international airport. Coy has been executive management roles in the public and private sector, nationally and internationally, over the past 29 years. His wide-ranging experience includes executive responsibilities in the United States, Coast Guard, the White House, as a business leader. I want to introduce Mr. Coy.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Melanie, and thank you all for coming here tonight. I enjoyed upstairs, and thank you for the reception. I had a chance to speak with many of you this evening. Over 20 years ago, I had the opportunity of a lifetime when I was given a chance to work shoulder to shoulder with some remarkable leaders and public servants as a White House Fellow. A free society, President Johnson used to say, cannot be a spectator society. It requires participation, full, zestful, and knowledgeable. So it's a great personal honor for me to be here today and to address this audience, who are united by a love of country and public service, and who have so obviously taken President Johnson's maxim to heart. Especially in a country like America, with so many moving parts, leadership is extraordinarily demanding. Yet the work to secure the nation's transportation system since the most devastating attack on commercial aviation in history provides valuable lessons in the exercise of strong and effective leadership at all levels. Even more important, the traumas and triumphs over the past 10 years have given us fresh evidence that the great strength of America and of America's leaders lie in the character and courage of the American people itself. The founder of the White House Fellows, John Gardner, used to marvel that a nation of just 3 million inhabitants living in sparsely populated settlements produced a generation of leaders like Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Madison, and others of special note. They were uncommon statesmen, but characteristic of the country and the common virtues that produced them. Unafraid and audacious, willing to take risks, determined to contest the premier power of their times if that's what it took to win our independence and secure our freedom. America is once again fighting for our freedom and our independence, not with the world's most conspicuous power this time, but with an anonymous foe who fights in the shadows. Yet it is again to the character, courage, and determination of average Americans that we turn to ensure freedom prevails. This battle against terror is being fought to preserve the qualities of liberty, creativity, and innovation that distinguish us as Americans. It will be won by Americans, like the ones I see in this audience, who exhibit these very same qualities. Transportation systems have always been a favorite target of terrorists. And so today I've been asked to speak with you on some of the leadership lessons I learned while running the Massachusetts Port Authority. When I became the CEO of Massport, which owns and operates Logan International Airport, 2 regional airports, a major bridge, the container and cruise ship terminals at Boston's port, I took charge of an organization that had seen this country's new enemy up close and personal. 2 of the 4 planes that were used to attack this country took off from our airport. There is no way to adequately describe the grief that Logan felt at being forever linked to that terrible incident in our history. Yet by joining Massport, I was also given an opportunity to see America's new patriotism at work. The local newspapers questioned my appointment because I had no direct experience managing either a large transportation or economic development organization. But I had flown aircraft, sailed ships, and worked at senior levels of government. It's fundamentally my belief that every organization is either spiraling upward or spiraling downward. And if you think you're standing still, you're falling behind. To reverse an organization that is suffering from a loss of revenue, a total lack of morale, a bad reputation, and still needs to serve the public, you need a dramatic event to grab the organization and get everyone's attention. Part of that came with a 10% reduction in staffing due to the downturn in air travel and revenue. But that's obviously a very negative event. What I needed was what I call a positive action-forcing event. You may recall that Congress mandated that all airports electronically screen all checked bags by no later than January 1st, 2003. When I arrived on the job in April of 2002, a letter from 39 other airport leaders seeking relief from that requirement waited for my signature. I decided to just say no and to say yes to a gamble. We were going to make that deadline. It was a remarkable effort we undertook. For a TSA workforce that had not yet been hired, for procedures that had not yet been developed, and for a system that had never been deployed in that manner. As many as 800 workers on site every day, working multiple shifts, 7 days a week, sacrificing time with friends and family during the holidays to get that project done. It was a project that encompassed 85,000 square feet of brand new bag space, 55,000 square feet of renovated space, 3 miles of conveyor belts, 400 electric motors to run those belts, a computer system to make sure the bags didn't get lost, 8 electrical substations to run the equipment, and 44 large screening machines. Patriotism is not too strong a word to describe the motivation of these citizen patriots who did 2 years of construction in about 6 months. It was patriotism seen most vividly on the hundreds of average construction workers and managers who beat the clock and beat the odds by laboring nonstop to complete a new baggage screening system that improved protection for Logan's passengers. And they did it under tight congressional deadlines that most of the so-called experts said we could never meet. They came to Boston from nearly 40 states. Few came for the money. Instead, most came, like one man from Ohio, living in a trailer hooked to the back of his truck, who said he was here as my way of showing my patriotism. The plans for Logan's baggage screening system were the first in the nation to be approved by TSA and resulted in the nation's first inline screening system to be built and remains the only major airport system to be fully automated. Secretary Tom Ridge came up to see our system and said, quote, "Truly a testament to will, to planning, to energy, and to the patriotism of everyone involved." Now that success allowed us to move forward with even more organizational changes and security improvements. While that project was underway and getting done, I wanted to make sure that Massport's organization fit our mission and our operating strategy. So working with the senior management team, and at times with supervisors and managers, we set out to look at our structure, our objectives, and our decision-making processes. I ended up writing this short 12-page document that every employee and every new hire received. I wanted to do that because nobody ever comes to work to do a bad job. They often just don't know what a good job is. Our role as leaders is to give our team the guidance and the direction so that they can perform. The key in my mind is that you've got to push decision-making down as close to the, quote, customer as possible and as close to the action as possible. And if you're going to do that, you've got to give people responsibility. And if you're going to give them responsibility, you've got to give them authority. And if you're going to give them responsibility and authority, you've got to hold them accountable. And I think the best way to describe that is a story I like to tell about Mary Jane O'Meara. Mary Jane O'Meara had been working at the Tobin Bridge, a toll bridge in Boston, for 12 years. She'd been running that bridge. So shortly after I got there, I asked Mary Jane to come in, and I asked her a question. I said, "Mary Jane, how much does it cost us every time a car goes across our bridge?" She said, $2. I said, no, Mary Jane. That's what people pay us. That's our revenue. How much does it cost us? She said, "I have no idea what it costs us. Nobody's ever asked that question." I said, "Well, Mary Jane, how do you run the bridge if you don't know what it costs and how much it's working?" She said, "The finance people take care of that, and I don't have to worry about that." I said, "Do you know how many cars go across the bridge?" She says, "I know exactly how many cars go across the bridge." I said, "Do you know how much money you collect?" "I know exactly how much money I collect." "Do you know how much money you spend?" "I don't know that, but I can find it out from the finance folks." I said, "Here's what we're going to do, Mary Jane. We're going to make a chart, and we're going to take all the money that you spend, and we're going to divide it by the number of cars." And you could just see the wheels of accountability and responsibility coming into her head. She said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, you're going to tell me what you're going to do to make it better." She said, "Well, it gets higher in the winter because of snow." I said, I bet it melts in the spring." I said, "Let's do a 6-month moving average," because I didn't really care about that. She said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "We're going to watch it, and if it's going down, I'm going to say, 'Good job, Mary Jane, keep it up.'" She says, "What if it goes up?" I said, "I'm going to ask you what you're going to do to fix it, and if you don't, I'm going to fire you." She said, "Fire me?" I said, "Well, yeah, Mary Jane, I've got to fire you because you're not doing anything to fix it. I can fix it. I can take your salary right out of that thing, and I'll look like a genius. Now, either you can do it or I can do it, but somebody's going to do this, and I think you ought to do it." So I brought on board a young guy who had been a consultant asked him to go over there and do an activity-based costing model. I called it an algorithm. When I told Mary Jane I wanted to do an algorithm, she thought it was a dance. So she came back. I said, go over there and help her out, show her how this thing works. Do not come back and tell me that she's stupid. Don't come back and tell me she can't do it. I want you to go over there and show her how to get it done. And 3 months later, she came back and sat down in my office. She started crying. I said, Mary Jane, what are you crying about? She said, I just want to thank you. Now I know how the bridge works. I said, good, Mary Jane. Now let's go manage the hell out of that bridge. And that's what she did. And so she went out and found some revenue by advertising. She managed her costs, and she ran a great bridge over there. But you could just see the wheels of responsibility. I gave her the responsibility. I gave her the authority, and then we started holding her accountable. Also in our strategy booklet, we described our values: respect for the individual, integrity, service to others, and excellence in everything we did. We described our 4 strategic business principles: world-class operations, investments in value-creating infrastructure, meeting or exceeding all performance expectations and promises, and finally, we're going to be good citizens. And the final guidance was, if all else fails, do the right thing. So if folks weren't working along those guidelines, they certainly weren't doing a good job. We also revamped our financial management system, our operating metrics. We even rebuilt our personnel evaluation system, which, like most evaluation systems, said everyone was perfect. I called it the Lake Wobegon system, where every day is sunny, everyone is attractive, and all the kids are geniuses. And let me just tell you a quick story how we changed that. First of all, we went through and changed all the job descriptions, or looked at all the job descriptions. Then we looked at our metric pay, because we used to give out bonus pay, but that would be handed out, and it was just a couple %, so their friends and buddies and the supervisors would hand out a little bit of money. So I took all that money back, and I decided to hand out bonuses. And then I kind of force-fed a bell curve so that we could get some sort of a bell curve. And I said, it really doesn't make sense to have more than 25% of the people being perfect. And so I'll accept, since before everybody was perfect, I'll accept that as a new standard. Now we're going to look at standards of perfect. And then we said we'd probably have 5 or 10% of people that need some help. And I'd ask all our senior managers to come in when they'd done their personnel reviews and show me what their bell curve looked like. And if it was all flat or all in one section or all in one section, I told them that they were going to get a bad review because they clearly didn't know how to evaluate people. I'll be damned if people didn't start coming in with bell curves. And we started having a good management evaluation system, and it worked very well in terms of recognizing the people, because the people that are working for you, they know who the good people are, and they know who the people that are just hanging on. We can probably talk more about that in the Q&A if you'd like to. There's a lot more I could say about new security technologies, but I think I'm taking too much time. I was asked to talk for about 20 minutes. The most important thing, I think, is to remember you can't do security without weaving it into good customer service, reliable operations, and our fundamental individual rights. They're not separate. They must work together. And most importantly, we must energize our traditional American values, character, and common virtues that our country was built upon. Today, we must not allow complacency to set in. We must continue to be unafraid and audacious, willing to take great risks, determined to confront the evil ideology power of our time if we hope to keep our independence and secure our freedom. And just as our forefathers did 200 years ago, we're able to win our freedom at that time. Ultimately, it will be won by Americans, like the ones we see it every day at the airports, ports, firehouses, police beats, transit agencies, our servicemen and women who exhibit these very same qualities. It will be won in large measure by giving those Homeland Security frontline troops the best technology American industry can supply. Much of the fight has been on foreign soil, but we can't forget our airports, ports, tunnels, our bridges, roads, highways, soldiered by those who protect our food and water supplies, those who guard our power grids and our cyberspace, those who formulate antidotes to defend us against weaponized germs and other biological agents. Significant progress has been made to protect our transportation systems, but more is necessary. Now, as a friend and another former Coast Guard officer, Stephen Flynn, writes, we must engage all of our citizens. It's the taxi drivers, the vendors, the passengers, not police officers, not intelligence officers, who often sound the alarm. We must open up to our citizens with information. We must be transparent with the threats and prepare ourselves psychologically for the inevitable attacks. This means setting resilience as our national standard operating procedure. rapid restoration of our important systems, infrastructure, and societal values in the face of another attack tells terrorists they cannot win. Think of the British citizens with step-up-or-lift mentality in the face of day and night bombings in World War II, or how they responded after the July 2005 subway bombings when they went right back to work on the subways and buses despite the attack. But in truth, to successfully confront terrorism and to finally defeat its practitioners, we must act on both the strategic and the tactical levels. Certainly, the advancement of global trade and communication will have a long-lasting impact on the ultimate safety and security of our nations and the flow of our people and commerce. Certainly, technology and innovation must be deployed to the front lines of our critical infrastructures, economic systems, while considering customer service and funding streams. And I have some thoughts on funding streams we might want to talk about in the questions and answers. It's said the best defense is always a good offense, and no solution that I know of holds greater promise for suppressing, once and for all, the threats we face from those who would do us harm than a world united by peaceful, productive, and safe commerce. As others have said, the emergence of a worldwide economy, producing interdependence among nations through free trade, may be the most revolutionary development in recorded history. And it's true. It's not just that free trade allows people of diverse nationalities, cultures, religions, and points of view to interact with one another on a regular basis. It's where partnerships and even friendships are a natural result. It's the fact that when you depend on others for your daily bread, the very idea of a violent conflict between societies becomes a monstrous anachronism, as someone once said, because all conflicts, all wars, are inevitably civil wars, equally devastating to the victors and the vanquished alike. Peace and prosperity are not separate ideals. They're mutually reinforcing and organically connected. But because of our humanitarian character and openness for new ideas, a tolerance for multicultures and beliefs, a steadfast love of our individual liberties, personally, I'm very confident in our future and the ultimate outcome of the struggle. But until then, we need to stand the watchtowers of our society and use the strength of our technical and intellectual prowess to defend our way of life. Thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll take some questions. I feel like Phil Donahue.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
For the
Regis and Kelly.
Regis and Kelly, right, exactly. Can you hear me? Is this mic working? Yes, fabulous. For those of you who've not been to our forums before, we typically do a interactive question and answer session. We've pre-solicited some questions from the audience, which are going to be threaded into this discussion that I'm going to have with Mr. Coy. And I thank all of you for submitting those questions. And then hopefully at the end we'll have an opportunity to ask you to participate if we have some time left. But I want to actually just begin and really start talking to you with respect to funding. There is a significant imbalance of government funds dedicated to air transportation versus that of surface transportation security. Can you discuss the funding discrepancy, and should the government reassess where its funds are being allocated?
I'd be happy to. This is really loud. Is this too loud? Is it okay? Having run an airport and a port and a bridge, I think I've seen the funding levels at those three types of things, and it's certainly true that airports get the lion's share of the money. I think it's generally true that for the most part, aviation has been a key target, and it continues to be a key target of terrorists. That's certainly not to say that mass transit and containers are not. One of the ways and one of the ideas that I've had that I've floated around, particularly on containers, and I think it can be applied to other areas. In aviation, we have something that's called a PFC, and it's a passenger facility charge. And if you fly out of Denver Airport, the next time you fly out of Denver Airport and you look carefully at your ticket, you will see a PFC charge, and I'm going to guess at Denver, I haven't looked at it lately, it's probably $4.50. The FAA has approved it to go up to $6 if the airport asks for it, but right now most of them are about $4.50. And the way that money works is the airlines collect that money when you buy a ticket. They take that money, and they're allowed to sit on it for about 3 weeks, so they get the interest on that. Then they send all that money to the airport. It never goes to Washington. It never touches go. It doesn't pass by anybody in Washington, D.C., and it goes right to the airport. And the airport uses that funding stream to issue bonds. And by using that funding stream for bonds, the airport can build things and buy things. The FAA has to approve what that is, but within that list there's infrastructure, but it's also security. And I was thinking my idea would be for containers. One of the things that we have not done much of is secure containers. Less than 3% of the containers that come into this country, and there's about 12 million containers a year that come in, are inspected. Now, most of those come in through known shipping and those types of things, where Sony is shipping container after container of televisions, or IBM shipping computers, or whoever it is that's selling standard loads. And you know a lot about those kinds of shipping, those kinds of things. But there's a lot of containers that aren't inspected or not covered by that. And it seems to me that if we charged a container facility charge for every container that came into this country of, say, $10, since $4.50 per passenger going through an airport, it doesn't seem to hurt too many people. $10 a container, when you look at the value of the container, is really very minor. And if that money were then collected and then sent to the port of entry, whether it be a land port or an ocean port or an inland port, that stream of money could be used as a revenue source, a stream of revenue that could be used to issue bonds so that capital could be raised by that entity to build things. The other thought I've had is on, not that you're going to get me going on this stuff, I've thought a lot about it, is one of the things that I think that other transit agencies and other operating agencies around the country that could use is I think there's an opportunity for what I call operating leases or leasing of equipment. A lot of cities and a lot of agencies, they can find money for an operating budget, but finding capital is very, very tough. And I know you can't do it in the federal government, but I think state and local governments have some leeway. And I think there's some opportunities, and I know some people that are looking at trying to do this, where, for example, you want to deploy a chemical detection system throughout your subway system. And it's going to cost you $5 or $6 million or $10 million or whatever it's going to cost. And you don't have that kind of capital. If you could sign a long-term lease where you could spend a little bit of money every year, that equipment could be put in there. And because the private sector has opportunities for depreciation, the tax benefits and the business opportunity is actually pretty good for that.
Right.
So that's another idea that I've had of a way in which entities are looking to fund some things that they don't have funding for could do. The final idea I've had is that I think that in the grants that the Homeland Security Department puts out, my last recollection was they're putting out about $1 billion or a little bit more than $1 billion in grants. My suggestion is that by the time they get divvied up and divided up and come into an individual community, you're getting $5,000 or $10,000, and it's usually a photo op with somebody to buy a boat or to buy a life vest or to buy a car or buy something. My suggestion is that the Department of Homeland Security declare this the year of X, and it could be interoperable communications. So 80% of the money that we're going to be handing out this year will be for interoperable communications. We'll fix that issue. Next year will be for detection or identification or whatever it's going to be, but focus the money so that you can actually get some bang for the buck on it. Still hand out lots of money so you can have the photo ops for the politicians to get the chance to hand out some money in the checks, but focus the money that's coming out through the grants rather than just let it disperse out.
So you have some new creative ideas for finding fantastic money streams that haven't yet been tapped yet. And I really want to talk specifically about certainly the grant program that exists today and whether or not it has actually been effective. And when you're talking about focusing, how are you going to determine how you prioritize those?
Well, I think that would be up to the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security and consultation with Congress, and as we make policy. But I just pick one, and interoperable communications seems to be one that keeps popping up that doesn't ever get solved. Or they say it's solved, but it's not really solved, mostly because people don't want it to be solved. But that's another issue. But it could be detection systems, it could be chemical detections, it could be anything else. And I think what you say is that if you're going to apply for a grant, those grants that are in this category this year are going to go to the top of the pile, and those that are for something else will go to the bottom of the pile.
Is there a specific form of mass transit that is more of a target than others?
Ooh. Well, I think these folks here would probably be better experts than me at answering that. I don't want to even jump into that one and have somebody say I don't know what I'm talking about, because I probably don't. But I think that any transportation. We've seen it in subways. The system is so open. Just the New York subway system has as many entrances as we have gates at every airport in the country. So the protection of these open rail systems and these open mass transit systems is a real challenge. And so I applaud all of you out here that are trying to do that on an everyday basis. But I think there's lots of people where there's a significant gathering of people that's going to have some historic significance, or have some area where, because they're looking for press, they're looking for some ideas in which they can really get to it. The World Trade Center represented the capitalism of the United States.
Right.
And so I think that's obvious. So I think, I know the chief of police for the Amtrak is here. He's got his hands full, and I know others of you that are running transit agencies have your hands full as well.
So one of the things I understand happened after the Madrid train bombings were in Spain were bag screenings.
Right.
What do you think of employing those types of techniques throughout the United States? Is that possible? Is that feasible? And how effective would that ultimately be?
Well, I think it's probably logistically impossible to inspect every bag of every passenger getting on a commuter rail or an Amtrak or anything like that. But I think what they're doing of the spot random is fine. I think you have to do it in a way that is seen that you're being efficient. You're recognizing, that you're not doing it arbitrarily, capriciously, but you're trying to do it in a way that make people understand of what you're trying to do. And I think from what I've seen, and I'm sure most of those of you in the audience that have seen this, if you explain things to your passengers or to your customers of why you're doing it and what you're doing, they seem to understand. The rule of thumb we had at Logan was people are willing to stand into a security line. We started to measure it at about 11 to 12 minutes, and after that, they were getting antsy.
Right.
And so you want to keep the lines moving, and you want to keep that customer service going. I think you got to combine that, and I think making people aware. One of the things that we did at Logan and everywhere up at those facilities was what we called behavioral pattern recognition, and I think that's a great tool for everybody that's working in your organization.
Do you think that level of tolerance is going to differ if a person is actually flying on an airplane versus that of going on a commuter rail?
I think there is some difference. And if you're catching the last train, if you're going to cause somebody to miss a train,
right.
I'd be irritated. But I think that, again, it's part of the explanation process.
Okay.
And if you can get there early enough, so get the people that are coming, there's ways to do this.
Sure.
And you want to be random, but you don't want to be silly about it, I think. And that's where I think you push these decision making down to the folks that are on the scene, and people have some pretty good sense most of the time.
There's been an interesting expansion of commuter systems across the country. What recommendations do you have for local jurisdictions who is new to the commuter rail transit security challenge?
I'd go talk to the people that have been doing it for a while and get their best lessons. I think there's a lot of smart people out there doing things, and I think that one of the things we don't do very well, and we tried at Massport. I had my corporate security director get in touch with all of the other similar type agencies. But what you find are the security directors are pretty darn busy, and taking time to share and get involved with those kinds of things is another headache in their day. But I think it's important to get together, like in conferences like this, where you can share best practices and share lessons. I know one of the things that we did, that may be an example or a lesson that you could take, is that any time there was an aircraft accident, anywhere in the country, and sometimes in Europe we could do it, like in England and whatnot, we would send a two-person team. We'd send a fire person, and we'd send an operational guy to go immediately to the site and not get in the way, but kind of look over their shoulder and get the real-time lessons learned. And then they would come back and brief us as to what they saw and what they learned. And I thought that by doing that, they were actually able to help in some cases, if there was a real challenge and they needed another set of hands there. And it also built some relationships, because we'd always call them and tell them we were coming, and they say, okay, come on in, but don't get in our way. But being there right on the scene a day or two after the incident was really a learning experience. And we took that, and then we do tabletop exercises built on that to say, what if this happened here? How would we respond?
So you talk about lessons learned, but I want to talk about the information sharing environment that exists today, and whether you believe that that certainly transit security is being included in the communications with both local and state and federal to the degree in which needs to actually happen.
Well, I'm not involved with it on a day-to-day basis right now, and I'm sure that folks out here have an opinion. My experience is that you never get enough information, that it's always being closely held. And when you dig into it, what you'd usually find out is that there's no information to share. So I don't know if there's a lot out there that you don't already know. As I said in my prepared remarks, I think it's time that we become a lot more transparent and get out a lot more information. I think in times past, having worked at the National Security Council, I was the first deputy director for counterterrorism in the 80s, we were leery about handing out classified information to people that didn't have clearances. And that's the challenge. But if you get into it for very long, if you watch CNN or Fox or MSNBC or any of these shows, pretty soon, or you read the newspapers very carefully, you're seeing about the same thing that you're reading in the intelligence reports. The real key is the sources and methods, that you want to protect the sources and methods. And so I think the information needs to get out and needs to be transparent so that people can see what's going on. Because, as I said, it's the passengers, it's the people that are the people that the latest attempt in New York City with the white van. It was a store vendor.
Right.
Or somebody walking by. The police didn't know anything about that. The intelligence officers didn't know anything about that. So you've got to inform your public and get them involved as much as you can. And I think the more information you hand out, the better it's going to be.
Along those lines, what are the most effective campaigns in educating the public with respect to what might suspicious behavior look like and what criminal activity have you seen? And what do you think, and how do you think we can improve upon that?
Well, I think you're doing a pretty good job here. I applaud what you're doing here. I think this is a really, really good effort. I think that other ways to do it is obviously getting out in the public, going on local talk shows, getting out and dealing with the media, educating the media, bringing the media in to show them the challenges that you have. A lot of people are afraid to bring the media in to show their weaknesses or their vulnerabilities for fear it may show that they look bad. But my experience has been that they want to do a good job. They're trying to report something. Of course, you never like the way they spin it and the way they write it to make you look bad. I think the statute of limitations is gone, but I went over to see the editor of the Boston Globe shortly after I got there, and there was no parking spaces out in front of the paper. So I went back in the back and with my press secretary, and we parked back by the loading dock, and press secretary said, let's go up to the front door. I said, nah, let's just go into the loading dock. So I went into the loading dock and wandered around through, and being a sports fan, I got to see the Boston sports writers. That was cool. And then I went over to the editor-in-chief's office and banged on the door. His secretary out to get a cup of coffee or something. I said, I'm here to see you. And he said, how'd you get in here? I said, well, I just came in the back door. He said, well, we have security. I said, I know. So do we. But so next time you want to write about security, just be careful how you write about it. So
That's great.
So it was a little like a fun way to talk to the press. So I find the press are smart. All of the ones I've met are smart. They're about a half an inch or a quarter inch deep in what they know. But that's what you're there to do, is to help educate them and show them the challenges that you're trying to do, and I think that you can get the word out that way. I think with exercises, bringing in volunteers to play roles, we conducted a really big exercise where we actually got United Airlines to lend us an airplane. We filled it up with volunteers from the city, and we had them all out in the tarmac with the bandages and the blood and carting them around the city and whatnot. So that got them interested, and of course that was reported on the news, so they got people talking about that as well.
That's fantastic. One of the things that we have certainly heard a lot about is, especially here in Denver, is listening to people in Washington, D.C., New York, and other cities that have mass transit in which there's subways. And cell phone service in subways and other forms of rail transit has been a widely contested issue for security purposes and public convenience. Can you talk about the advantages and disadvantages and security implications of broadening cell phone service?
Well, I think that, I mean, it's obvious, I think. The cell phones have been used and can be used to detonate devices, and I think that's the obvious concern. I think that, again, it goes into the customer service standpoint, and if it were me and making the decisions, I hesitate to go one way or another, but I think I would say the customers' cell phones are a way of life now. And I get darn irritated when I lose my signal and I can't use it. I understand the reasons, I understand the concerns, and I understand the threats. But there are lots of threats and there's lots of concerns that we have to deal with. And again, I think that as we educate the public and that you let them know about what's going on, I think you're going to find a public that's going to be talking, reporting, and calling in these kinds of things. That doesn't mean it's going to prevent something, but I think that I would go on the side of using the cell phones personally.
Obviously, one of the big concerns out there is cyber attacks and cyber threats. Can you talk to some of the cyber threats facing mass transit systems today?
Well, I think they're huge, and companies, organizations, agencies are being attacked all the time. I was shocked to learn that at L3 Communications, we were a defense aerospace company and homeland security company. We were attacked at least 1 million times a month, and it was, when I heard that, I was shocked. I thought it was a mistake. A lot of it is done just by, I'm not sure the mentality of the people, of these young folks that want to get on the computer and see if they can hack in and wreak havoc with the system. I guess it's a challenge to them, but it is a real threat. And I know that there are countries overseas that are trying to do that. It's a new form of warfare, and it's something that we've got to stay on top of.
Can electronic fare cards, swipe or tap, aid mass transit risk management?
I think it can. I think that I can give a commercial plug here. I'm on the board of a company that called Clear that is doing secure identification with biometrics, and I think that there's some opportunities. One of the keys is that you want to know whoever's getting on your airplane or your mass transit. It would be nice to know who they are, and that you have some certainty of who they are. You can't do that 100% of the time. I understand that, but I think if you had, the more you know that who's getting on your system is good or bad, and you can start to alert some of the things that are going on there. I think there can be some things that are going on there. I know it's obviously, we all know it's been done with the boarding passes in airlines.
So earlier this month in Washington, D.C., Metro passengers fled their train after a woman threatened that she had a bomb.
Right.
The passengers, after fleeing, were at great risk of injury or death when they came close to the electrified third rail. So I think this goes along the lines of, you talked certainly about some of the training that you conducted with citizens, but what more can be done to prepare passengers for possible incidents that have the potential to leave them in danger while en route?
I've found, and this is more of a leadership lesson than a security lesson. I've found that you cannot say the message enough times. Whatever message as a leader or whatever message you're trying to get out, you cannot say it enough times. You say it 2 or 3 times and you think, God, everybody's heard it and everybody's tired of it. You cannot say it enough times. And I think that it's just a constant out there of talking about these kinds of things to make sure that people are aware. And people will grow weary and there'll be complacency, but that doesn't mean that you stop. I think you just have to keep repeating the message, whether the message is an internal message of how to make the organization better or an external message of how people can help in this area.
Can you discuss other useful tools and techniques that are being used effectively to enhance security that we haven't talked about yet for public safety transportation, and particularly other types of useful techniques like K9 units and so on and so forth?
Well, ironically enough, dogs seem to be as good a detection device as any. The challenge for dogs are that they're animals, and their attention span is so long, and they wear out. The challenge with all technology is that you get absolute certainty of a repetitive event. Well, that's the bad thing, because people can figure out that you've got an absolute rapidity of a certain event. And so on the other side, you want to have some uncertainty, or some not clear what's going on here, because the bad guys can always figure out if you have this doing the same thing time after time after time. That's where technology can help.
Okay.
But you also have to mix it up with some other things. There are some. Being at L3, I'm aware of some technologies that are out there trying to be developed. Sniffers, devices to sniff for chemicals and those kinds of things. The challenge is that there's a lot of chemicals out in the air, and when you're in a subway tunnel, there's a lot of fumes and a lot of things that are going on out there. There's a lot of things that can go boom. Fuel is in there, so there's a lot of challenges. But I think the greatest thing that we have to deploy is our fellow citizens. They 9 times out of 10, they are. It's the little old man or the little old lady who's looking next door, and there's something funny going on outside in their next door apartment, or there's something funny going on over here, and they make a phone call, and that 9 times out of 10 is how something bad that's going to happen gets caught. I've found the intelligence you'd like to have, but getting real-time actionable intelligence in this kind of an arena is really hard. And if you're sitting around waiting for that, I think you're going to be waiting for a long time.
Got it. Thank you. I want to take actually a number of questions from the audience. We've got some microphones that I'd like to pass around, and Suzanne and Andrew and Rebecca, can we do that? Thank you. So if anybody has any direct questions that haven't been asked, we'd certainly love to take it. In the meantime, right here. Great. You can just pass the microphone down. Yep, perfect.
Yes, I'd like to ask you to comment on profiling as part of the TSA investigations of people coming through and boarding a plane, or whether or not be any other type of mass transit. Using profiling as a method, as opposed to 96-year-old great-grandmothers shedding their adult diapers, and 8-month-old infants being molested.
That's a good question. First of all, I think profiling, in the sense that I think you're asking the question, is a really bad idea, because you're going to miss it. If you're looking for a woman, or an African American, or an Asian, or a Middle Eastern man, or whatever it is, that's not the way to do it. What we did was we deployed what we call behavioral pattern recognition. And the theory of that is that good people doing good things act one way, and bad people about to do bad things act a different way. And the challenge is how to identify that and to figure that out. And I'll give you an example of how we did that one time. I was telling Melanie this earlier. Shortly after we deployed our behavioral pattern recognition, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, sent a crew through Logan. They wanted to do a check, or a unannounced check at the checkpoint, to see if bad things could get caught. So they had some guys walking through the terminal that had fake guns and some fake bombs in their clothing and in their bags. And our guys watched these guys, and they were just acting strange. They weren't acting like a regular passenger. So they went up and asked them a couple questions, and their questions didn't hang together. So then we started asking more questions, and then we started getting a little more questions. Not me, I mean, but they were. And pretty soon we had them pinned up against the wall. And they finally flashed their badges and said, "No, we're here to inspect and trying to get through the checkpoint." Well, we had our guys this is not long after 9/11, so we had our guys at a pretty high level of anxiety, and they were really anxious to go do something. So I called then Secretary Ridge and because I didn't have anybody else to call, and I told him about it and asked that we want to have inspections, we want to have these things done, but you got to tell us about it. The point is that Timothy McVeigh would not have passed any kind of profiling. There's women that put some bombs on Russian airplanes that would have not passed any kind of typical profiling. And so profiling on physical characteristics is not a very good idea. Perhaps the way you're dressed, if you're in an overcoat and you say you're going to Bermuda, that doesn't make any sense. If you're in shorts and you're coming out here to ski, that doesn't make any sense. But so there's things that you can do to do that. On the woman with the diaper, I think I share what most people think, which is that sounds pretty silly to me. And I think that's a case in which I would, if I were in a position, I would want to push that decision-making down as close to the customers as possible, hold that FSD, the Federal Security Director there, responsible, hold him accountable, and give him the authority to decide who and what he's going to screen and how he's going to do it. Having a 90-year-old woman take off her diaper just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, that's not to say that what if, and we all understand that. But I think that the people on the scene and with behavioral recognition, I think you can screen through that pretty well, and I think people can make a better decision, rather than simply saying, on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, you're going to get passenger number 37, and here we go. And I think that's probably not the way to do it all the time. Although that's not you want to do some of that, but then you got to make some discretion and some logic behind some of these things. Does that answer your question?
That does, because I was really looking for behavioral profiling.
Right.
Is really what I probably was asking for, because that's what Israel does.
Well, we stole it from them, and that's what we did. We used Rafi Ron to come up, and the challenge they have is that out of Tel Aviv, they only do 1 million passengers a year. At Denver, at Logan, we're doing 20 million passengers a year. You can't do it quite the same, but the concept and the idea, and we trained everybody in the airport, from the ticket counter people to the store vendors to everybody, so that they could help us with the identification. I'm talking too much. I'm getting the high side here. There's a question back here. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was going to ask about the interviews, the way LL does it. Oh, okay, thank you. Thanks. I was going to ask about the interviews, the way LL does it, but I didn't realize that it was 1 million to 20 million. There are they try to do it as expediently as possible by pushing people around at the airports.
Who's they
the
Israel or TSA?
TSA.
I got it, yes.
TSA. And I know for sure because I was one of those people that got put in a cage. And it was a horrendous experience. And I didn't fly for 10 years, and I still have no desire to fly. I had to fly to Disney World. That was too far to drive. But I noticed things in general. What about packages going into the airports? Food services. They're coming in with large packages. They come in the back doors and in whatever, however they get in. And true, they might recognize Joe Blow 10 times a week that he may be coming in, or maybe only once a week or whatever. But nonetheless, who knows if a package hasn't been put on his vehicle that is full of an explosive, and
Right.
who knows if something hasn't been put on FedEx or something like that that was just mailed.
Really good question, and one that we tried to attack at Logan when I was there. In terms of the things in and around the airport, and I can't speak for Denver at all airports, I can speak for what we did at Logan, which was in the secure side of the airport, which was after the checkpoint. That's called the air side. Land side is the other side. All the vendors would bring their supplies in the evenings or in the early mornings, and we'd arrange with TSA to have them there. So all the newspapers, all the bottles of soda, all the hamburgers and things would go through the same x-ray machines that your bags went through. But they were doing that during off hours. Sometimes when they had to resupply, they'd do it during the regular hours. On the caterers, we had people over at the catering places inspecting the trays or the carts that come in and then they're sealed and locked, and then they're kept under secure until they come into the airplane and put up and load it onto the airplane. So we knew that. In terms of packages that are going on the airplane, those are not yet screened totally. Those are screened some. A lot of that has changed. The challenge with that, and I looked into that, is that the things that you put into your suitcases are fairly normal things. That's not true of all things. I could tell you lots of weird things that you find in suitcases. But in general, you're putting some clothes, you're putting your cosmetics, you're putting a hairdryer, you're putting those kinds of things in there. On the things that are being shipped by air, there's a lot of things. Some of them are heavy metal, some of them are engine parts, some of them are electronics and things like that, that simply x-raying them, you don't get a good image and you don't get the good detection on it. So it's a tough challenge. But it can be done. I know fellow Massachusetts, our congressman and senior delegate up there, Ed Markey, has introduced legislation to require screening of packages that go on airplanes. But a lot of that has been taken off. Mail is still going on. The mail is being screened by the Postal Service before it goes on the airplanes. So it's a continuing challenge, but it's one it's partly technology and partly some funding and partly people wanting to get over the hurdle to do it. Yeah. Okay, well, the airport is, that's another good question. And what we would also do there is we installed security systems so that people had to have a biometric pass to get in. And then we also looked at randomly. We couldn't, like tools. I mean, when you're repairing an airplane and things like that, tool bags, we would randomly go around with our security folks to check on that. But it's a real challenge. And so what we would do is we would, for the airport employees that had access to the air side, to the airplane side, we would revoke their passes, their badges, every 18 months or 2 years. So they'd have to come back in and get them so that we kept on top of where those badges were and who was going in there.
Well, I think we're just about done. I want to, first of all, thank you, Mr. Coy, for your fabulous presentation. And
Thank you.
We're excited to have you here. And I wanted to thank all of you for coming here tonight. We host these forums on a regular basis, and we hope that you left your contact information for us to invite you again. For those of you who are going back to the Four Seasons, I believe the buses are picking you up from where you were dropped off. So again, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank RTD and Chief Tarbert for hosting with us. So thank you.
Thank you.